you ever see a trade happen and immediately think, what on earth was that general manager doing? Hockey history is full of those moments where one team gave away a superstar and got almost nothing in return. These are the dumbest trades in NHL history, and we're starting with one that shocked the entire world in 1988, the day Wayne Gretzky was sent from the Edmonton Oilers to the Los Angeles Kings. Wayne Gretzky, LA Kings, 1988. In 1988, the NHL world stopped when the Edmonton Oilers traded Wayne Gretzky to the Los Angeles Kings. Gretzky wasn't just another star, he was the star. By then, he had already won 4 Stanley Cups in Edmonton, set scoring records that looked untouchable, and built a dynasty almost single-handedly. He was only 27 years old, right in the middle of his prime, and still the face of hockey around the globe. Fans in Edmonton thought Gretzky would retire as an Oiler. Instead, they woke up to headlines that the Great One had been sold. The Oilers owner Peter Pocklington needed money, and that played the biggest role in this deal. Rather than keeping the best player alive, he cashed in, literally. Los Angeles sent Edmonton $15 million in cash, plus Jimmy Carson, Martin Galinas, and 3 first-round picks. On paper, that sounds like a decent package. In reality, it was nothing compared to Gretzky. Carson and Galinas had short runs. The picks didn't turn into franchise players, and the Oilers lost their golden ticket. Meanwhile, Gretzky transformed hockey in Los Angeles overnight. The Kings went from a forgotten team to selling out arenas. Hockey grew in California because of this trade, and Gretzky still piled up points, helping the Kings reach the Stanley Cup final in 1993. For Edmonton, it marked the end of an era. They won one more cup in 1990, with the pieces left behind, but the dynasty was over. Fans never forgave management, and even today, people still call it the biggest mistake in NHL trade history. Patrick Waugh, Colorado Avalanche, 1995. In December of 1995, the Montreal Canadiens made one of the most disastrous trades in NHL history when they sent Patrick Waugh to the Colorado Avalanche. Waugh wasn't just any goalie, he was already a 2-time Stanley Cup champion, a Conn Smythe winner, and widely seen as one of the best goaltenders the game had ever produced. But a clash of egos in Montreal set the stage for a shocking exit. The breaking point came in a game against the Detroit Red Wings, where Waugh was left in net to give up 9 goals before being pulled. Embarrassed and furious, Waugh told the Canadiens he had played his last game for them. Management panicked and moved quickly, trading him and Captain Mike Keane to Colorado in exchange for Jocelyn Thibault, Martin Ruchinski, and Andrei Kovalenko. At the time, those names sounded serviceable, but none of them came close to filling Waugh's skates. In Colorado, Waugh proved immediately why the trade was such a disaster for Montreal. In his very first season, he backstopped the Avalanche to their first Stanley Cup, becoming the final piece of a championship roster. He would go on to win another cup in 2001 and cement his status as arguably the greatest goalie of all time. The Canadiens, on the other hand, stumbled through years of mediocrity and never found a proper replacement for Waugh. For Montreal fans, watching him raise another cup in Colorado was salt in the wound, and this trade remains one of the darkest moments in franchise history. Tuukka Rask, Boston Bruins, 2006. In 2006, the Toronto Maple Leafs pulled off one of the most painful trades in their history when they gave up Tuukka Rask. At the time, Rask was a promising young goalie drafted in the first round, but the Leafs already had Andrew Raycroft, and management believed Raycroft would be their long-term solution, so Toronto sent Rask to Boston in exchange for Raycroft, thinking they were set in net for years to come. The reality was the complete opposite. Raycroft struggled badly in Toronto, posting poor numbers and losing his starting job within 2 seasons. He was gone from the Leafs by 2008 and never regained the form that once made him Rookie of the Year. Rask, on the other hand, blossomed into one of the best goalies of his generation in Boston. He became the backbone of the Bruins for over a decade, winning the Vesa Trophy in 2014 and leading the team to multiple Stanley Cup finals, including a championship in 2011. This trade is remembered as a symbol of Toronto's mismanagement during the 2000s. The Leafs gave up a franchise goalie for almost nothing in return, while Boston got nearly 15 years of elite goaltending. Whenever fans talk about the worst trades in Leafs history, the Rask deal always sits near the very top. Cam Neely, Boston Bruins, 1986. In 1986, the Vancouver Canucks made a trade that would haunt them for decades. They sent a young Cam Neely and a first-round draft pick to the Boston Bruins in exchange for Barry Peterson. At the time, Peterson was a proven scorer, and Vancouver believed he would be the centerpiece of their offense. What they didn't realize was that Peterson was already in decline after major shoulder surgeries. Neely, meanwhile, was just 21 years old and had only scratched the surface of his potential. Once in Boston, he exploded into one of the most feared power forwards in NHL history. Neely's mix of size, toughness, and scoring touch made him the face of the Bruins for over a decade. He scored 50 goals in 44 games in 1994, a mark that only a handful of players in history have reached. On top of that, the draft pick Vancouver included in the deal turned into Glenn Wesley, who also had a long and successful NHL career. Pettersson gave the Canucks only a couple of decent seasons before fading out of the league, leaving Vancouver fans devastated. Boston, on the other hand, ended up with a franchise legend in Neely and an extra cornerstone piece in Wesley. It's no surprise that the Neely trade is still remembered as one of the most lopsided deals ever made. Quick pause here. If you're liking this so far, drop a like and subscribe so you don't miss the rest of the dumbest trades in NHL history. Zdeno Chara and Jason Spezza, Ottawa Senators, 2001. In 2001, the New York Islanders pulled the trigger on a deal that would go down as one of the worst decisions in their history. They traded Zdeno Chara, forward Bill Muckalt, and a second overall draft pick, which became Jason Spezza, to the Ottawa Senators in exchange for Alexei Yashin. At the time, Yashin was seen as a star center, but he was also coming off a messy contract dispute and was known for being inconsistent. What the Islanders didn't realize was that they were giving up the foundation of another team's future. Chara developed into one of the greatest defensemen the game has ever seen. With his size, leadership, and shutdown ability, he became the backbone of the Bruins' defense for over a decade and eventually led them to a Stanley Cup as captain. Jason Spezza, the player Ottawa drafted with that pick, went on to become one of the most skilled centers of his era, scoring over 1,000 career points. Yashin, on the other hand, never lived up to the hype in New York. His production declined quickly, and his massive contract became a burden on the Islanders for years. By the time Yashin was bought out, Chara was lifting the cup in Boston, and Spezza was starring in Ottawa. This trade left Islanders fans shaking their heads, and is still considered one of the franchise's most embarrassing moments. Filip Forsberg, Nashville Predators, 2013. In 2013, the Washington Capitals made a move that is still hard to believe. They traded away Filip Forsberg, their young first-round draft pick, to the Nashville Predators in exchange for Martin Arat and Michael Latta. At the time, the Caps were pushing for a playoff run and wanted experienced depth, but what they gave up turned out to be a future superstar. Forsberg quickly blossomed into Nashville's best forward, scoring goals, setting up plays, and carrying the offense for years. He became the all-time leading scorer in Predators history, putting up multiple 30-goal seasons and making highlight reel plays on a regular basis. In return, Washington got almost nothing. Arat scored only 2 goals in 62 games with the Capitals before being shipped out, and Latta was mostly a depth player. This trade is often brought up as one of the most lopsided deals of the modern NHL era. Nashville stole a franchise cornerstone for pennies on the dollar, while Washington gave away their future for short-term help that didn't even last a full season. Joe Thornton, San Jose Sharks, 2005. The Boston Bruins shocked the hockey world in November of 2005 when they traded their captain and franchise player Joe Thornton to the San Jose Sharks. Thornton was only 26 years old, entering the prime of his career and one of the best playmakers in the league. Yet Boston decided to move him for Marco Sturm, Brad Stewart, and Wayne Primo, solid players, but nowhere near the level of Jumbo Joe. Thornton wasted no time showing why the trade was a disaster for the Bruins. That very same season, he won the Hart Trophy as league MVP and the Art Ross Trophy as the NHL's scoring leader, becoming the first player in history to win both after being traded mid-season. In San Jose, he turned into one of the best passers the game has ever seen, recording over 1,100 assists and leading the Sharks to years of playoff success. Boston, meanwhile, got 3 role players who never made a major impact. Fans were furious, and the trade is still seen as the moment the Bruins gave away a generational talent for scraps. While Boston would eventually rebuild and win a cup years later, this trade will forever stand out as one of their most embarrassing mistakes. Jaromir Jagr, Washington Capitals, 2001. In 2001, the Pittsburgh Penguins made the tough decision to trade away Jaromir Jagr, one of the most talented players in NHL history. Financial problems were crushing the Penguins, and they felt they had no choice but to move their superstar. Washington jumped at the chance, acquiring Jagr and František Kuchera for Chris Beach, Michal Sivek, and Ross Lupashuk. On paper, it looked like the Capitals had pulled off a steal, but things didn't go as planned. Jagr was expected to dominate in Washington, but he never found his rhythm, his numbers dipped, the team struggled, and the relationship soured quickly. He lasted only 2.5 seasons with the Capitals before being traded again. The young players Pittsburgh received weren't stars either, but the Penguins still managed to survive thanks to the rise of Mario Lemieux's comeback, and later, Sidney Crosby. The real disaster of this trade is how it wasted a prime opportunity for Washington. They thought they were adding a piece to push them to the top of the league, but instead, they got a short and disappointing run. For Penguins fans, it was painful to lose Jagr, but for the Capitals, it became a costly gamble that never paid off. Teemu Selanne, Anaheim Ducks, 1996. In 1996, the Winnipeg Jets made a move that still makes fans shake their heads. They traded Teemu Selanne, already one of the most exciting young scorers in the NHL, to the Anaheim Ducks. Selanne was only a few years removed from his unbelievable rookie season, where he scored 76 goals, a record that still stands today. Winnipeg sent him, along with Mark Schoonard and a pick, to Anaheim for Oleg Tverdovsky, Chad Kilger, and a prospect. The Ducks couldn't believe their luck. Selanne joined forces with Paul Kariya to form one of the most electrifying duos in hockey, known as the Finnish Flash and Captain Duck. He went on to score hundreds of goals for Anaheim, cementing himself as a franchise icon and later a Hall of Famer. Meanwhile, Winnipeg's return fell flat. Tverdovsky had a couple of decent years, but nothing close to Selanne's level, and Kilger never became more than a depth player. For Winnipeg fans, this trade was heartbreaking. They watched a superstar in his prime leave town for a return that never came close to equal value. For Anaheim, it was the birth of a legend who would define their franchise for years. Markus Naslund, Vancouver Canucks, 1996. The Pittsburgh Penguins made one of their worst moves in 1996 when they sent Markus Naslund to the Vancouver Canucks for Alex Stoyanov. At the time, Naslund was a talented young forward who hadn't fully broken out yet, while Stoyanov was seen as a tough, physical player who could bring grit to Pittsburgh's lineup. The reality was brutal. Stoyanov lasted just 45 games with the Penguins and scored only 2 goals. Naslund, on the other hand, exploded in Vancouver. He became captain of the Canucks, led the team in scoring for 7 straight seasons, and was a finalist for the Hart Trophy in 2003. With his skill, leadership, and consistency, Naslund became one of the most respected players in the NHL. This trade is often used as the textbook example of giving up on a young player too early. The Penguins essentially traded away their future captain and superstar for nothing, while Vancouver built their team around Naslund for over a decade. Rick Middleton, Boston Bruins, 1976. In 1976, the New York Rangers made a decision they would regret almost immediately. They traded a young Rick Middleton to the Boston Bruins in exchange for veteran Ken Hodge. At the time, the Rangers believed Hodge's experience and scoring touch would give them a quick boost. Instead, it turned into a disaster. Hodge struggled badly in New York, putting up only 41 points before retiring shortly after. Middleton, meanwhile, thrived in Boston. He became one of the most consistent scorers of the 1980s, recording multiple 40-goal seasons and finishing his career with over 400 goals and 988 points. He also became known as Nifty Middleton for his slick hands and smooth style of play, making him a fan favorite in Boston. This deal is remembered as one of the worst in Rangers history. They gave away a player entering his prime for a veteran who had almost nothing left in the tank. For Boston, it was a steal that gave them a franchise star for more than a decade. Eric Lindros, Saga, 1992. The Eric Lindros trade saga in 1992 is one of the most complicated and controversial deals in NHL history. Lindros was drafted first overall by the Quebec Nordiques in 1991, but refused to play for them, forcing the team to trade his rights. 2 different trades were actually worked out at the same time, one with the Philadelphia Flyers and one with the New York Rangers. The case went to arbitration, and the Flyers were awarded Lindros. What Quebec got in return was a treasure chest. The Nordiques received a package that included Peter Forsberg, Ron Hextall, Mike Ricci, Chris Simon, and multiple draft picks. Forsberg alone went on to become a Hall of Famer and one of the best two-way players in the league. That deal transformed Quebec, and when the franchise relocated to Colorado, Forsberg became a centerpiece of their Stanley Cup championships. For Philadelphia, Lindros was dominant at times, winning a Hart Trophy and putting up incredible numbers, but his career was cut short by injuries and concussions. In the end, Quebec Quattro Colorado came away as the clear winner, turning Lindros' refusal into the foundation of a dynasty, while the Flyers were left wondering what could have been. Brett Hull, St. Louis Blues, 1988. In 1988, the Calgary Flames made a trade they would soon regret. They sent Brett Hull, along with Steve Bozek, to the St. Louis Blues in exchange for Rob Ramage and Rick Wamsley. At the time, Hull was seen as a decent prospect with a good shot, but Calgary believed they were adding proven veterans who could help them win right away. What they didn't realize was that they had just given away one of the greatest goal scorers the NHL would ever see. In St. Louis, Hull exploded. He scored 72 goals in the 1989-90 season, and then an incredible 86 goals in 1990-91, one of the highest single-season totals in history. He became the face of the Blues and eventually finished his career with over 700 goals, ranking among the top scorers of all time. Meanwhile, Ramage and Wamsley gave Calgary a short-term boost, but were quickly forgotten. The Flames did win the Stanley Cup in 1989, but Hull went on to have a Hall of Fame career that Calgary fans could only watch from afar. It's remembered as one of the most painful trades in franchise history because they gave up a legend just before he became unstoppable. By the way, if you're enjoying this list, make sure to hit like and subscribe. It really helps us keep bringing you these wild NHL stories. Doug Gilmour, Toronto Maple Leafs, 1992. In January of 1992, the Calgary Flames made another deal that still haunts them. They traded Doug Gilmour, along with 4 other players, to the Toronto Maple Leafs in exchange for a package of 5 players, including Gary Leeman. On paper, it looked like a balanced trade. Both sides were swapping multiple names, but in reality, it turned into one of the most one-sided deals the NHL has ever seen. Leeman and the other players Calgary received had little impact. Gilmour, on the other hand, instantly transformed the Maple Leafs. In his first full season in Toronto, he put up 127 points, a franchise record that still stands today. He became the heart and soul of the team, leading them on deep playoff runs in 1993 and 1994 and becoming one of the most beloved players in the Leafs' history. The Flames, meanwhile, never got anything close to equal value and slid into years of decline. Leafs fans still celebrate the Doug Gilmour trade as one of the greatest moments in their franchise's history, while Calgary remembers it as one of their darkest mistakes. Adam Oates, St. Louis Blues, Iron Geo's 1992. Just a few months after landing Brett Hull, the St. Louis Blues pulled off another huge win when they acquired Adam Oates from the Detroit Red Wings in 1989. Detroit sent Oates and Paul McLean to St. Louis in exchange for Tony McKegney and Bernie Federko. At the time, Federko was a respected veteran, but he was near the end of his career. Oates, meanwhile, was just starting to shine. In St. Louis, Oates became the perfect partner for Brett Hull. His incredible playmaking skills set Hull up for goal after goal, turning the duo into one of the most dangerous tandems in NHL history. Oates went on to lead the league in assists multiple times and finished his career with over 1,000 points. For Detroit, the return was short-lived. Federko retired after only 1 season with the Red Wings, and McKegney didn't make much of an impact either. St. Louis, on the other hand, got years of elite production from Oates and paired him with their new superstar in Hull. This trade is still remembered as one of the worst in Detroit's history because they gave away a player who turned into one of the best playmakers the game has ever seen. If you want to see more unbelievable NHL stories, just click on this video right here, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel.